Okay, Norma, you can begin.
Muy buenas tardes y bienvenidos al tercer de 3 ayuntamientos comunitarios de Pilsen de este mes sobre la preservación. Mi nombre es Norma Celedón. Es un placer para mí servir como su moderadora esta tarde. Soy residente actual de La Villita y he trabajado previamente en Pilsen durante más de 15 años en una agencia llamada Mujeres Latinas en Acción. Sigo sirviendo a la comunidad de varias maneras. Soy bilingüe, pero hoy me van a escuchar mayormente en inglés porque tendremos una traductora y enseguida le daremos instrucciones para conectarse con esos servicios de traducción. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this month's third and final Pilsen Community Town Hall on Preservation. My name is Norma Celedón, and it is a pleasure to serve as your facilitator this evening. I'm a current resident of Little Village, and I have worked in Pilsen for over 15 years in the past at an agency called Mujeres Latinas en Acción. I continue to serve the community in various ways. This is but one of those ways. I am bilingual, but tonight you will hear me speak primarily in English because we have a translator with us. And following, we will let you know how to access the interpreter. This meeting is being simultaneously translated into Spanish. We ask that you dial the conference call line listed on the screen and in the chat box to listen to the Spanish translator. For those of you on the phone, here is the number, 312-535-8110. Let me repeat that, 312-535-8110. And the access code is 375-243-35. And again, that's 375-243-35. You don't need an attendee ID number. You simply press the pound or hashtag sign. En español, esta reunión se está traduciendo simultáneamente al español. Para obtener acceso a esa traducción, por favor, marque la línea de llamada de conferencia que aparece en pantalla y también en el cuadro de chat para escuchar la traducción al español. Para aquellos de ustedes en el teléfono, aquí está el número, es 312-535-8110. Les repito, 312-535-8110. Y el código de acceso es 375-243-35. No se necesita un número de identificación de asistente. Simplemente hay que presionar el signo que es como crucigrama. En inglés lo conocemos por hashtag. Y para recordarles que esta sesión va a ser grabada y transmitida en vivo sobre el canal de YouTube del Departamento de Planificación. Al tomar parte en esta sesión por internet, usted indicará que va de acuerdo que se le grabe. Okay, this meeting is also being recorded and streamed on the Planning Department's YouTube page. By taking part in the webinar, you're agreeing to be recorded. Okay, let's get started. So joining us this afternoon from the Department of Planning and Development are Maurice Cox, Commissioner of the Department of Planning and Development, and Gerardo Garcia, Lead Planner for the West Region. And also joining us on this call is, I apologize. Also on the line, answering questions that come up are Eleanor Gorski, the First Deputy Commissioner, and Diana Kovalo from the city's Historic Preservation team. And listening in on the call also are Alderman Tom Tunney, the Chairman of the Zoning Committee, and other city staff from the Planning Department and the Mayor's Office of Community Engagement. This afternoon, we're going to hear opening comments from the Commissioner, then a short presentation from Gerardo and the Commissioner, We will then move into a question and answer and comment session and allow for brief closing remarks from Alderman Siccho Lopez and Department of Planning and Development staff. You may ask your questions in writing through the chat box or simply type speak or hablar to be added to the queue of those who want to make verbal comments. We have more than 110 people that have registered for this event, so we are going to limit all verbal comments to 90 seconds to try to access as many questions as possible. On the screen in front of you, you are going to see some ground rules for community discussion this evening. Let me go through these. The first one is step up and step back. And with that, we are encouraging your questions. If you have not had an opportunity to share your thoughts, please do so. If you have already shared, please make sure that you allow for others to speak. We also ask that you assume the best intentions. We want you to assume that all stakeholders want the best for their neighborhoods. And the final category is avoiding interruptions. We are all working from home, so we ask you that you try as much as possible to minimize distractions. And also in particular, we want to stress that we expect you to express your truth, but we ask that you do so respectfully, that you embrace discomfort. Your opinions matter. We expect there to be discomfort as we explore and share information. But again, there should be no place for disrespectful language, either with audio or in the chat. And for this consideration, we thank you. Also wanted to mention that these guidelines have been used for many virtual meetings hosted by the City of Chicago, and I hope that they serve as tools to ensure that we have a productive and respectful meeting. It is the intent this afternoon, as time permits, to listen to as many community voices as time allows. If we don't get to your question, please make sure to email the department at dpd@cityofchicago.org. DPD staff will then circulate an FAQ document next month with questions that have been heard at these meetings, as well as other questions that we weren't able to get to. And so with that, I will turn it over to Commissioner Cox for his opening remarks. Commissioner?
Thank you, Norma. And good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the last of the 3 meetings hosted by the Planning Department to discuss the proposed landmark district for Pilsen and other neighborhood concerns that you've raised over this month. First, we appreciate your participation today, and I very, very much value your time. If you've attended the 2 other department meetings this month, you should know that the content and the format of this meeting will be very similar, with some additions at the end that reflect what we've heard. I want to take a moment to acknowledge that we know that this is a very difficult time to conduct any type of community engagement. There's economic uncertainty in our city, there's civic unrest. The pandemic is worsening and disproportionately affecting the Latino community. There are public safety concerns and just a multitude of other issues that challenge our ability to focus on the kind of collective future of Pilsen. And yet, the City of Chicago feels very strongly that we have a civic responsibility to engage residents and bring you ideas and resources that address the preservation not only of buildings, but of Pilsen's people and the culture of Pilsen as we work, I think, to address these issues and many, many more. So again, I'll start this meeting by providing a little background as to why we're here. Firstly, I recognize that there was really not a robust engagement process when this landmark district was first proposed back in 2018. That process preceded my arrival. It preceded the alderman's election, and it's only been complicated by this just ongoing pandemic, which has taken our traditional means of community engagement and made it all but impossible. So here we are engaging virtually, but acknowledging those shortcomings and the pending City Council decision on the proposed landmark district that, as many of you know, would have gone in effect in August. I asked the zoning committee this summer for a 6-month extension for any decision on the district. And the committee unanimously approved the extra time so that I could help foster the kind of conversation with residents and community organizations and the aldermen that we've seen over these past months. So I feel like these discussions have been extremely helpful to me and has encouraged far more flexibility, far more openness, and just more understanding of this common goal that we have, and that is to preserve the people, the character, and the culture of Pilsen. So we've received a lot of comments over the month, and they have centered on St. Adalbert's. It's been about the perceived costs involved in living in a proposed district, and even the very origins of the district designation. And so I hope to continue that process of learning and listening today. I think the city planning department has an incredibly dedicated staff of urban planners, and our job is to respond to your community needs. And we all recognize the organized opposition to the district that's been in place and has been working really for nearly 2 years now. Chairman Tunney, who is on the phone listening, has agreed to set a special meeting to consider the landmark district on December 1st. So the value, the viability of the historic district will be voted on December 1st. If the proposal is voted down, we want to start discussing what public resources could serve the community in the district's absence. Nothing here is a foregone conclusion. We're keeping an open mind, and we hope you will do the same. And so with that, I will turn it over to DPD's own Gerardo Garcia to walk you through a brief presentation.
Thank you, Commissioner. Good evening, everyone, and thanks again for being with us this evening. My name is Gerardo Garcia. I'm an architect and urban designer with the Department of Planning, also the lead planner for the West Planning Region. And so we want to start the discussion tonight really with acknowledging the agenda for this evening. And we've got an agenda that really is designed to help us lay out what exactly a historic district is and how we see it as a tool within the larger context of the neighborhood. A little bit slightly different content from previous meetings is really a summary, as the commissioner just outlined, of a lot of the feedback that we've heard over the last 2 meetings. And then again, we want to have some discussion and some question and answer and leave room for the alderman to make some remarks, and as well as Commissioner Cox to close us out. And so with that, we felt it was important to start the conversation with an acknowledgement of some of the trends that we have observed through our own data collection, that we have learned about in talking with folks in Pilsen. And the first one is that, we know that the Latino population in Pilsen has dropped by about 14,000 people since 2000. And we know that this, in combination with a series of other factors, are triggering a very justified fear of displacement and gentrification from community members. And some of these other factors include, the demolition of more than 90 buildings in Pilsen by real estate developers and speculators. And what we also know is that most of these buildings were replaced affordable housing and replaced it with larger, more expensive buildings, as can be seen in this collection of recent developments from Pilsen. We also know that longtime homeowners are cost burdened, and we've heard that the primary source of this burden is increased property taxes. And we've also heard and understand that legacy businesses are closing and disappearing in Pilsen. Pictured here is Nuevo Leon restaurant in Pilsen, demolished as a result of a fire, but nevertheless, this really neighborhood institution was lost in the process. And we know that there are a number of other neighborhood institutions and businesses that find themselves in similar predicaments. And, lastly, we know and we understand that decades of cultural expression continue to be threatened in Pilsen. And what we mean by that is murals. We know of at least 2-3 instances of murals being covered in Pilsen. So with that, I want to hand it over to Commissioner Cox, who will talk a little bit about his background in preservation of communities and why this effort is important for himself and the department.
So thank you, Gerardo. You go to the next slide. So I just thought it would be helpful, there are always new people on the call, to understand why I feel so strongly about historic preservation. I myself bought a home there on the lower right in a historic district, predominantly African-American neighborhood over almost 30 years ago. And the first thing I realized was that all of these beautiful houses in my neighborhood could be demolished. They had no local control. And so I came together with my neighbors and we fought the city to have this neighborhood, which was a low-income neighborhood, to be the first so designated as a historic district and locally controlled. And that neighborhood has thrived ever since that designation. So I think of this as a right that all residents have and should be able to take advantage of. Next slide. And I've also fought really strongly to bring equity to rural communities. This is a community in the poorest county of Virginia where people were living in substandard shacks. And I worked with those simple African-American farmers to form the largest affordable housing nonprofit on the Eastern Shore on land that they owned, and that they became the biggest advocates for conservation districts, where they put the vast majority of their land in the conservation district to assure that farming would go on for a generation while they built these extraordinary affordable housing that you see at the base of the image. And next. And lastly, in my time in New Orleans, I worked with culture bearers, the Mardi Gras Indians, to take claim of an entire corridor by purchasing these amazing, simple shotgun houses to become the new campus, cultural campus for the Mardi Gras Indians. And they most recently restored a number of them just this year. And so for me, these tools are available to us, and we can shape them and bend them to our will, even in forms that they were not intended to be used. So when I come to the conversation in Pilsen, I come with that spirit and that experience, and I hope to be of some value to residents who are trying to preserve the culture of Pilsen. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. And so really this leads to the question of what is a historic district, and what do we know a landmark district to be? And so, as the Commissioner mentioned, really currently it's a tool to preserve buildings. As you can see here from this parade shot of 18th Street from over a century ago. But our approach to it would be that it's also a tool to preserve buildings and their stories and the stories of the people who have occupied them over time. It's also a tool to help prevent the type of development that we see here in Noble Square and that we've seen occurring in Pilsen, where again, larger, more expensive buildings are being weaved into the fabric of historic buildings along commercial corridors. And we know that this has already started to take shape. Since the Landmark District was recommended by the Landmarks Commission about 2 years ago, we've had 5 applications for demolition, and all but one were denied. It was deemed a building that was dangerous and hazardous. But we suspect that if the Landmark District isn't adopted by City Council, it's very reasonable to think that these applications would come back through the system as well as others. And so stepping back a little bit, looking at landmark districts citywide, we did a little bit of data analysis, and we know that there are 67 districts throughout the city. And as you can see from the map, there's clearly a lack of representation of landmark districts on the south and west sides of the city. We also broke that down in terms of landmark designations by ethnicity and the different kind of immigrant and cultural groups of the city. And so we know that there are 8 that are tied to kind of European immigrants, 1 that's really tied to Asian immigrants, 34 for the African-American community, and not 1 landmark district in the city that celebrates Latino heritage or culture, and certainly Mexican culture, Mexican-American culture would be included within that. So another bit of feedback that we've heard as we've had these conversations over the last month are really the cost of repairs and the burden that would place on homeowners. But as we kind of looked at numbers and tried to understand, the cost to do a typical maintenance project would be the same inside of a district or outside of a district. And so the other thing to clarify here is that the district doesn't require anyone to do any work to their property on day one. These are routine maintenance items that property owners choose to do and over time to maintain their properties. And so the cost of those are independent of the landmark district. And so, understanding the mechanics of the district, what we really want to ask ourselves is, could a landmark district be a tool to preserve Pilsen and its people? And over the last, almost 15 years, what we've heard through different planning efforts in the community is that the answer could be yes. So going back to the quality of life plan from 2006, there were planning strategies around there calling for rehabilitation of local structures rather than demolishing and preserving the character and beauty of Pilsen streets. The quality of life plan from 2007 also talked about creating cultural corridors and preserving murals. And finally, in 2018, the Pilsen Little Village Action Plan talked about a landmark district to complement the National Historic District in Pilsen that currently exists. And so what exactly are we talking about when we are referring to the landmark district? So the current proposed boundary or boundary recommended by the Landmarks Commission essentially stretches from Levitt Street to the west to Sangamon to the east, along 18th Street, and jogs down to Ashland, Racine, and finally 21st Street to the south. It comprises about 900 buildings and is a quarter of a square mile in size. And again, just to refresh everyone, you know, the preliminary landmark recommendation was made in December of 2018. In May of 2019, that landmark recommendation was made to City Council by the Landmarks Commission. And at that time, essentially the clock started for the designation to occur within 1 year if there was no action by City Council. And so what that meant is that by May 2020, the designation would occur unless it was voted down by the City Council. As a result of COVID and its subsequent economic recession, matters before City Council received an extension, a 3-month tolling extension. And after conversations with Alderman Cicho Lopez and a request to consider alternative boundaries, the department requested extension to the overall timeline of the designation, essentially for 6 months, which would mean that by February 2021, if no action occurs by City Council, the designation would go into place. What we know now is that the designation ordinance will be voted on by the Committee on Zoning in December. So what has changed since essentially May of 2018 when the preliminary landmark recommendation was made by the Landmarks Commission? And a number of things that we're going to discuss, right? The first one being a smaller boundary limit that the Department of Planning looked at the request of Alderman Cicho Lopez, and as well trying to think of new ways to bring financial resources to the table. And so just as a reminder to everyone, this is again the landmark boundary or the district boundary proposed by the Landmark Commission. I would say that this thing would go. And what we are looking at now.
I forgot I had a 4 o'clock call. I totally missed it.
What are you looking at now?
I just joined. It's 4:30, and I just joined this 4 o'clock call I was supposed to be on.
Is it possible to get everyone to silence their calls, their mute?
Thank you, Commissioner. So what we did is look at an alternative boundary that essentially would focus on the corridor's commercial buildings and mercantile buildings. So essentially this boundary runs along 18th Street and along Blue Island Avenue from Levitt to the west to Sangamon to the east and 21st Street down to the south. And rather than a quarter square mile, this boundary is proposed at 1/10 of a square mile. And so with that, I want to hand over the presentation to Commissioner Cox, who is going to summarize a little bit of the feedback that we've heard through these last 2 meetings over the course of the month.
Yeah, thank you, Gerardo. So, you know, given that this is our last meeting that we're hosting for now, we wanted to just recap a little bit of what we've heard to date and what it might mean moving forward. So what we've heard loud and clear is that first and foremost, Pilsen is about the people. Can you go to the next slide? So Pilsen is first and foremost a place for people. We've heard that loud and clear, and that there is fear and anxiety that residents are feeling about being displaced, and it's real. and therefore residents of Pilsen are organized. They're organized around this singular issue of anti-displacement. And we acknowledge that, and we've heard you. And I can say that you have the city's commitment to do something about that. And it's by creating a housing and preservation and anti-displacement plan in partnership with the aldermen, in partnership with community organizations, and in partnership with residents. That is the commitment that we are willing to make at this point in the process. Additionally, we've heard a lot about St. Albert's and that St. Albert's should be preserved. And we agree that it should be preserved. And I think the city is ready to commit to preparing the designation report and to coordinate with the Archdiocese for designation and the redevelopment of St. Adalbert's. And then lastly, we've heard, you can go back. So, and lastly, I think we also understand that Pilsen values its self-determination. I think that's come across loud and clear to us, and we understand it and we support it. And so you have our word, the city can commit to an ongoing partnership with Pilsen stakeholders when we're invited and where we can actually add value. And so that is a commitment that I feel comfortable in making as a result of this process. And I thank you for that input. So at this point, I think we would like to hear from you. And we are going to open this up for discussion and questions. And we have the appropriate DPD staff here to help respond. And I'm going to pass this back over to Norma.
Thank you, Commissioner, and thank you, Gerardo. And before we get started, Gerardo, I was wondering if we could go back to the slide about the translation services.
Yes.
I would like to provide a reminder to our monolingual Spanish speakers here. Me gustaría como recordatorio mencionar que esta reunión se está traduciendo simultáneamente al español. Si usted gusta tener acceso a traducción, por favor marque la línea de llamada de conferencia que aparece en pantalla y también en el cuadro de chat. Para escuchar la traducción al español, para aquellos de ustedes que en el teléfono están con nosotros, aquí está el número 312-535-8110 y el código de acceso es 375-243-35. Voy a repetir, teléfono es 312-535-8110 y el código de acceso es 375-243-35. Si se les pide, no se necesita un número de identificación de asistente, simplemente presione el signo de crucigrama o hashtag. Okay. As a reminder, you may submit your questions in writing through the chat box. We've had a number of those already lined up, or simply type speak or hablar in the chat box to be added to the queue of those who want to make who want to ask verbal questions or make comments. If we identify them, we may prioritize individuals who have not gotten a chance to speak at our previous meetings. And as a reminder again, if you do not get your question answered, or you would prefer a response in writing, please email dpd@cityofchicago.org. And again, as a reminder, we've had more than 120 people that have registered for the event. So we're going to limit verbal comments to 90 seconds. I apologize in advance because you'll hear me when you have 20 seconds left. And at that point, we respectfully ask you to summarize. Again, we do this to make sure that we hear from as many of you as possible. And for the sake of fairness, I will also ask our city staff to be as brief in their response as possible so that we, again, may hear from as many voices as possible. So I will start with a written question. And this comes on the topic of San Adalberto. St. Adalbert Church and properties have not been used for religious ceremonies since July 2019, when the church was closed and deconsecrated. Therefore, St. Adalbert does not require the consent of the Archdiocese to be designated as a landmark. So why then is the property not being considered for landmark designation? Commissioner?
Gerardo, can you put the slide back up? Because I want folks to understand what exactly we're planning to do. Are you able to get to that slide?
It's up now. Can you see it?
Yeah. So I think I said during my remarks that we have heard you. This is an iconic landmark in Pilsen that is without dispute. And the city can begin the process of designation without the consent of the Archdiocese. And what this slide is saying is that we will do that. We will begin the process of doing a designation report. And they still own the building. And so we will have to coordinate with them for any redevelopment scenarios of St. Adalbert's. So yes, the city will commence in preparing a designation report to protect the building. And we are committing to coordinating with the Archdiocese for the redevelopment of that same facility. I don't know how much clearer I can be. But thank you for your advocacy for this very important building. We share your advocacy for it, and we will begin our process of preparing the designation for its landmark status.
Thank you, Commissioner. Our next is a question, a request to speak that comes from Mary Lou Seidel. Ms. Seidel, if you would please ask your question or make your comment, and you have 90 seconds. Thank you.
All right, my name is Mary Lou Seidel. I'm the Director of Community Engagement at Preservation Chicago. I will read here a statement from our Board of Directors. We have a mission to save Chicago's historic built environment, and we are committed to creative preservation strategies. Pilsen is a community full of historic buildings and murals. The unique character that defines the physical landscape of Pilsen is extraordinary, and it will take equally extraordinary measures to accomplish the goals we share with the people of Pilsen to protect that history, minimize gentrification, avoid displacement, and significantly slow demolitions. The Pilsen community needs to be allowed to lead a process to accomplish these shared goals. Time is of the essence, as a long line of developers will be queuing up to apply for demolition permits in the neighborhood. The city of Chicago, in Pilsen and throughout the city, needs to take forward action to create more tools to slow gentrification and displacement. We need more tools to make preservation a more financially viable option for all of Chicago, regardless of personal wealth. The city needs to create more tools to stop the demolition of our older buildings. Ordinances and policies can be changed to make demolition the option of last resort. Preservation Chicago stands with the Pilsen community. We urge the city of Chicago to allow the Pilsen community the time and space to define its own plan to achieve our shared goals. We also
Ms.
stand.
Heidel, you have 20 seconds.
Thanks. We also stand with the Pilsen community in universal support for immediately advancing a Chicago landmark designation for the St. Adalbert Church, designed by architect Henry Schlacks and a pillar in the Pilsen community since 1912. Preservation Chicago also stands ready to help the city of Chicago with the research and preparation for that report. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Seidel. We will go to another request to speak, and that is Erendira Guerra. Ms. Guerra, you have 90 seconds.
Buenas tardes. Quiero
Buenas
hablar un poquito sobre Pilsen, la 18, como nosotros lo conocemos. Es una comunidad de lucha. Es una comunidad que luchó para todas las cosas que hemos tenido como mexicanos latinos. Luchamos para la High School Benito Juárez, luchamos para el Centro de Salud, luchamos para la Biblioteca Rudy Lozano. Nosotros luchamos para todo y ustedes deben saber que vamos a luchar en contra de ese Pilsen Landmark. Y ojalá que ustedes puedan decir eso, señor Fox. No vamos a aceptar eso. Y lo que a mí me gustaría hacer hoy es que si ustedes no pueden decir hoy mismo, ya ni tienen que votar porque ya no va a haber el Pilsen Landmark Ordinance. Eso es lo que la comunidad quiere. Y sobre las demoliciones, ¿quiénes dieron permiso a todas las demoliciones que han tenido? Ustedes, la ciudad de Chicago. Ustedes dieron permiso a todas las demoliciones. Ustedes que hablan de dos lados de su boca. Nosotros no podemos tener fe en ustedes porque ustedes no han hecho nada para nuestra comunidad, especialmente cuando su jefe, Lori Lightfoot, dijo que nuestra comunidad era comunidad hace 10 años, que era peligroso para estar en las calles en la noche. Eso fue antes cuando habían 10,000 familias mexicanas y ya que no están, ya dijo ella que es una comunidad muy elegante y muy buena onda, okay? If you would like me to translate, I can, it's up to you. But I was saying that our community, Pilsen, it's a community of struggle. We have struggled for everything that we have here. Nothing has been given to us, from Benito Juárez High School to the clinic, to the Rudy Lozano Library, to everything, for Jobs for Latinos at the CTA, for Jobs for Latinos at the post office. We have struggled for everything that we've had in Pilsen, and we will continue to struggle, Mr. Cox. I would suggest we do not want the Pilsen landmark. Let's stop it right now and say, okay, you don't even have to vote. Stop. We understand, we've heard you. It's dropped. The issue is dropped. It's resolved. No Pilsen landmark. And lastly, I would like to say that what about the demolitions? You talk about the demolitions. Who allowed all these demolitions to go on in our community? You did. The city of Chicago allowed it. And so now you're talking out of the other side of your mouth. We want to save you from the demolition by making this fancy landmark community, historical community. Well, we know, we've read about what happens in other communities. We know with a historical designation who's going to benefit, and that's why we are completely against the landmark proposition. And I hope that all of you have heard this loud and clear. And Mr. Tunney, I'm so glad that you're on this chat. Thank you for deciding to vote on it finally, but we don't want the landmark, and I hope this is loud and clear to everybody. And lastly, about St. Adalbert, I hope you save it and landmark it and whatever, that's wonderful. And I hope you make it into low-cost housing for our people, because that's what we need. We don't need landmark, we need low-income housing. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Ms. Guerra, and thank you so much for translating your own comments. We appreciate that. Sorry, next we have a question from Alan Mellis. What are the enforceable plans to stop demolitions if the landmark district ordinance is not approved?
I'm not sure who is prepared to answer this, but I will say my piece. We live in a country of property rights. We don't get to say what individual property owners can do with their property. If they want to demolish it, they have a right to do so. The only mechanisms that we have as a city is to create districts which have agreed upon rules that require someone filing for a demolition permit to hit the pause button and to have a public conversation, the pros and cons, by an appointed body, the Landmarks Commission, and then they make a recommendation, and that is the tool. That's all a landmark district is. And so obviously the reason why I have been supportive of the district is because I know that there won't be any mass demolition of Pilsen. It will be demolished by 1,000 single actions by 1,000 different individual property owners. And so I have been supportive of this because I know it works, because it's worked in thousands of communities across the United States. And so without it, we don't have an effective way to intervene when a property owner wants to demolish their property. And that is as simple an explanation as I can give. And if there's anyone else on the staff that would like to add to that, happy to take other points of view. But this is the tool that local governments are given to intervene when a demolition is requested by a property owner. If you are in a historic district, you have to go through a public process, state your case, and there is a commission that makes the recommendation.
Thank you, Commissioner. Do we have any other comments regarding this question?
This is Eleanor Gorski. I just wanted to add that demolitions and the review of demolition permits come under the review of the Department of Buildings. So if demolition laws, as I see in the chat, is something that the community wishes to review, that would be under the purview of that department. And I'm sure the alderman's already speaking with them about that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, with that, we will move on to the next request for speaking, and that comes from Virginia Lugo. Ms. Lugo, if you would like to speak, and you have 90 seconds.
Hello?
Yes, Ms. Lugo,
I
go ahead.
apologize. So there's several things that I wanted to say, but quickly, Commissioner Cox, you mentioned that everyone has property rights and you guys are not trying to force this on us, but why are you literally forcing this on us without anyone having the option to opt out of being in the district? The city is really not going on what they're they're saying something and they're doing something completely different. The other thing that I wanted to say is why, so during your presentation, you're saying about all the prices on construction or maintenance, repair, and for example, the windows. But that is not true because as here in Pilsen, there's many homes that have, for example, large windows. And if someone were to want to change those windows and make them smaller, they won't be able to because they'll have to, they'll have to be the same original and the same material, and it won't, it will be a lot more expensive for people to maintain those windows. Also, Alderman
Ms.
Byron,
Lugo, I just want to remind you, you have 20 seconds.
Alderman Byron in the last, in the previous two meetings has also said that he did not want to, I'm sorry, lost my train of thought. He did not request to modify the proposal. He requested to just eliminate it. I mean, it's not, and you guys are not listening. You guys keep saying the same thing, that he requested to modify the proposal, which is not true. So why are you guys still saying the same thing?
Sure. Thank you for your comments. So when the district, the larger district that Gerardo showed was proposed, it had something 900 plus structures in it. And it included the mercantile buildings on 18th, but it also included a lot of multi-unit buildings as well as single family. And I felt, given that we were hearing so much, that we were hearing so much about the burden that the district would have on residential properties, I said, well, Alderman, what options would you potentially be willing to consider? And he asked the planning department formally, show us another option. Is this the only option? And so upon his instruction, we constructed the alternative that took out the residential properties from it and cut it into half, which was the other map. So this was a request by the alderman. It was in writing. I still have the email asking, he said, I won't support the larger district. What are the alternatives? And as a planning department, we work on behalf of the alderman. And when they make a request like that, we answer it. And we did. And so that is an option. It only would go forward if the alderman supported it. And so that is how that came. It wasn't thrusted on anyone. It was requested. The other point that you made about why does this district even come about? My understanding is that there was an acceleration of individual permits to demolish buildings in Pilsen. And the only way to stop them was to propose the district so that we could hit the pause button. And in fact, this proposed district has been in place now for almost 2 years, and it has all but stopped the demolition from happening. And so either applicants have withdrawn their application, either the speculator who was approaching a property owner saying, well, if you can secure the demolition, I will buy your property. And then they came before the commission and then decided, you know what, I'm not going to do the developer's bidding. So effectively, that's what the district does. It allows residents to pause, to stop, and then consider the pros and cons of that decision. And then lastly, on regards to improvements, no one is forced to do any improvement on their home. And in fact, guidelines would be constructed specifically for Pilsen and where Pilsen is. And that is something that we would do together with the community so that we aren't holding it to some unreachable standard, but we are working within the means that Pilsen residents can when they do work on the property. So that's a commitment that we've made. If this were to go forward, this would not be the same standards that other districts use. This would be tailored to where Pilsen and Pilsen's residents are at this point in time.
Thank you, Commissioner. Okay, with that, we are going to another question from our chat, and this comes from Father Chak Dam, who tells us, I have been a pastor of the largest church in Pilsen for 28 years. I continue to live in Pilsen now 35 years. I have seen a lot of change. I do not know any resident or property owner who supports the preservation designation. I understand the commissioner's logic. What is the source of support from Pilsen for his preservation designation? I don't know any. Commissioner?
Well, there are 950 properties in the proposed district. I'm reading the chat right now, and there's clearly someone who lives on the 17th Street block who is saying she supports the landmarking and the preservation of Pilsen. So if anything, I don't know if the people we have on this call represent the 950 households in the proposed district. I know that the folks who we are hearing from on this call are opposed, but we have not heard from the 950 households that are a part of it. And we may never, quite frankly, hear from them, but we are hearing loud and clear from those who don't support it. I wish there was a way to reach each and every resident. But as you know, there are many, many things that are vying for their attention, and many folks are simply don't have the time to focus on this.
Thank you, Commissioner. We are now going again to another request to speak or comment, and that is from Jacqueline Baez. So Ms. Baez, if you will please speak, you have 90 seconds.
Hi, my question and comment is for Commissioner Cox. I have several sources within your department that have shared with me that your department is involved in discussions for real estate development plan for St. Adalbert. Let me be clear, we reject any type of real estate development. I support Sosa's plan for a shrine and retreat house. Commissioner Cox, can you comment on the internal discussions your department is having? Thank you.
Sure. There are no active discussions about the redevelopment of St. Adalbert's in the planning department. None. I wish there were developers who are willing to take that project on, but as it currently stands, there are no active discussions about the redevelopment of St. Adalbert's.
Thank you, Commissioner. Moving along to a question that has come into the chat box from John Betancourt. That's right, save buildings and architecturally interesting blocks. It's good for tourism and most particularly for a city's tax base. At the cost for current residents and increases on property values for everyone, which is most important to maintain the integrity of a cultural community? I believe that question is, which is the most important to maintain the integrity of a cultural community? It's unclear if that is a comment or if that is a question from Mr. Betancourt. I'm not sure if he'd like to come on and clarify his question.
Yeah. Oh.
Okay, we will leave that an open invitation to Mr. Betancourt. Otherwise, we are moving on to a request to speak, and that comes from Elizabeth Blasius. Ms. Blasius, if you would please ask your question, and as a reminder, you have 90 seconds.
My name is Elizabeth Blasius. I'm an architectural historian based in Logan Square. As a preservationist, I'm not in support of this district as is, but I am in support of strategies that prevent demolition of naturally occurring affordable housing and vernacular architecture that are led by the community, supported by the preservation movement, and enforced by the city. We need new tools, including comprehensive demolition reform. The landmarking of Pilsen was presented in 2018 as one component to what was rolled out as the Pilsen and Little Village Preservation Strategy. That strategy included enhanced affordability requirements for market rate housing developments, new housing resources to help existing residents avoid displacement caused by gentrification, and an industrial modernization strategy to increase sustainable head of household jobs. Out of these, the presentation of the Landmark District has been the only component of the plan that has been completed. And per Mr. Garcia's own words, landmark districts are tools to preserve buildings. Can you talk about where these other processes are as far as a comprehensive strategy, as they seem to need coordination with other departments? And also, I have a second question. In the last meeting, there were 2 additional tools that were mentioned, a density preservation overlay district and a special character overlay district. Is there any place where the public can find more information on these tools? And will community members of Pilsen or other communities looking for ways to prevent demolition be able to review them for use in other neighborhoods?
I can take part of this question. So, to the first part of the preservation strategy, given the discussion and the kind of conversation around the landmark district that has been going on over the last year, and certainly over the course of this month, we really thought it was more important to really take a step back and understand that or acknowledge the feedback that we've been hearing, and the framework in kind of the 3 larger parts of feedback that we outline really are meant to, or are structured around the idea of a more comprehensive strategy. So for example, saying that we understand that, displacement and gentrification are justified fears, and that we are committed to an affordable housing strategy in partnership with local stakeholders. There's really a way to say, maybe what we outlined isn't appropriate or isn't what's important for Pilsen. And in respect of that kind of self-determination, we'd like to take a couple steps back and start that conversation and figure out what that comprehensive strategy looks like, rather than what was outlined 2 years ago. And seeing that community priorities have changed over time. And I'm sorry, what was the second question?
About the special character overlay district was one of the questions. And I don't know if Eleanor Gorski is on the call right now.
I am. Commissioner, the question was, I'm sorry, to the speaker, the question was, where can these apply? I got cut off for a moment.
No, it was we talked about additional tools or other types of tools to preserve the character of Pilsen. And I think she mentioned the special character overlay district as a concept. And where are we with that?
Oh, yes. So the character overlay district as a concept was introduced as part of as an ordinance to the Chicago Committee on Zoning, and it was passed. So the authorizing legislation that allows a character district to be put in place anywhere in the city has passed City Council. So it's up to the local elected official and the community to decide if they want to pursue a character district, and we at DPD would be happy to make that happen and facilitate it.
And I know that with regard to comprehensive demolition reform, demolition is it's a very local matter in the city. There are some parts of the city that have suffered mightily by, city-sponsored demolition or federal-sponsored demolition. And I can assure you, their concerns are not about demolition at this point. They have more land and more vacancy than is really healthy for a community. They're looking for ways to build back those communities. So I think there are issues of demolition, and I think Pilsen is one. And I know that the Alderman has put forward a concept for a 6-month moratorium on demolition. I have said in the past, what about the 7th month? We have had a historic district proposal in place for 2 years. And in effect, it has slowed down significantly the demolition. So 6 months is not going to get us to a comprehensive strategy, no more than the past 2 years have. So it is a proposal that has been put forward for 6 months. What we are hoping are long-term comprehensive strategies. And I don't know of any magic bullet. I'm certainly willing to help, find something, but we are bringing forward the tools that we know are out there and that have been tried and proven successful in many, many, many communities. And that's why we're here discussing this particular proposal.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Ms. Gorski. We have another question or request to speak, and that comes from Kyle Frayne. Kyle, would you please share your thoughts or your comments? Okay, it appears maybe.
No, I'm here. I just got the option to unmute. Thanks for allowing me to speak. And Commissioner Cox, I just wanted to, I guess, ask how we as a community are expected to trust what DPD is saying. Just in this exact conversation, you're very quick to point out a single resident in support of the district, but fail to also clarify that in the city's own survey of over 100 responses, there was a 90% plus opposition. In addition to that, many local community groups working together here have obtained another over 300 affidavits in opposition to this district. And yet you still make it sound like there's potentially some support or there's some ambiguity about what the community wants here. If you can't be honest with us about this, how can we expect that you'll be very honest with us about much else going forward here?
Well, no, thank you for the comments. I think I acknowledged early in my comments that there is consistent opposition to the district. And it's been, 2 years in the making, and it's certainly accelerated over the past months. I acknowledge that. I also acknowledge that we have a responsibility to bring these tools forward and discuss them in the public arena. And I'm committed to doing that. And I'm also committed to listening to the community. I mean, don't think that this opposition has gone unheard. And in the end, the council will make the decision. The council it's their decision in the end. Our job in the planning department is simply to bring forth ideas, have them thoroughly researched, gather comments, and then the city council will decide the fate of this.
Thank you, Commissioner. We will now go to another request to speak or question, and that request comes from Milos Turek. Mr. Turek, if you would like to make your comment or ask your question, please go ahead. Okay, we can come back to Mr. Turek. We also have a request to speak or ask question, and that comes from Julie Sawicki. Ms. Sawicki, will you please go ahead?
I'm sorry, can you hear me now?
We can hear you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, and thank you, Commissioner Cox, for your commitment to St. Adalbert's. I feel like we have made some tremendous progress today. But now I am concerned about your last comment when you stated that you wished that there was a developer that was interested in St. Adalbert's. This is alarming to me because a developer will want to do housing at St. Adalbert's. And me, as a real estate broker, I have crunched the numbers and looked at all types of housing options for St. Adalbert's. And none of them, even market rate development, will not sustain St. Adalbert's long term. We are looking for a long-term solution that will sustain the church and the entire site. That is one of our objectives. And as you know, and for the benefit of those that may not have been in previous meetings, I'm with the Society of St. Adalbert, and we're advocating for maintenance of the entire site as a Catholic site, as it has been for over 143 years. We wish to convert the church to a shrine and convert the convent into a B&B style retreat house. And that would be the internal revenue generator to sustain the church and entire site long term. So I'm afraid that your comments may open the door for a bunch of developers pounding on the door of the Archdiocese to take this, to take the rug out from under our feet. We have access to financing to finance the plan that we have. We have a whole business plan for this, and we do not wish for any developers to be involved with this project.
Right. Well, I appreciate your comment, and you have a very compelling idea. It's one idea. In this very conversation, we heard of someone else on the phone who thought that would be an excellent location for low-income housing. That's another idea. And I suspect that there are many other ideas. And I believe that they all warrant a fair evaluation. And so I can't understand how your development idea should be the only idea that is considered. I think any idea that people have, whether it's to continue to use it as a church, that is a development idea, or whether it be converted to affordable housing, or whether it be an arts and culture center, these are all very valid proposals. And I think that they do deserve a full vetting and evaluation. And so when I say I wish that there was a group that had a compelling plan for the reuse of the church, I believe that that is a good thing. It's a positive thing. And your idea is compelling, but it should be compared to the next developer's idea and to the next developer's idea, and may really the best and most respectful idea ultimately be successful.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'd like to return back to the request to speak from Milos Turek.
Yes, I'm present.
Thank you.
Hello. So I am representing as the person speaking previously, Polish community, and I believe that if anything will happen to the structure of the church, different than making the church again, then we will lose such a component of this place, which is very, very necessary for both Hispanic, Latino community and for Polish community. And it will be very, very big shame. You know, it was like in a Stalin era in the Soviet Union, they were changing churches to the buildings serving as a factories. And it's very shameful that things like this are happening, or there are attempts of things like this happening in our town. So yes, it's very important. Other voices are very important, but it cannot be done that way, that affordable housing can be done inside of a church. Church should stay a church, and it's very, very old building, and nobody will be able to build again 150 years old building. I mean, 150 years old church. So it's very important for us that we will not lose our honor to keep having such a important thing as a church in a Pilsen community.
Well, I mean, I appreciate it, and thank you for the sentiment. And I have traveled every neighborhood of Chicago, and I will tell you, I have seen dozens of buildings that were churches that are empty. So either somehow we reconstitute ourselves and fill those buildings with worshipers again, or we are going to have an enormous number of these extraordinary edifices that will lay empty. And I think that is really what we're facing. I would love nothing more than to see Adalbert's reconsecrated as a church. But there are things that unfortunately are conspiring against the churches that we have throughout the city continuing to be able to be maintained for their primary use. And that's a much larger conversation, but it is also a reality. I have visited personally over a dozen vacant churches in Chicago that may not be redeveloped as churches again. That's a very sad moment that we're in, but that is a reality. And I would rather see a valid use of that edifice in the neighborhood than to see it closed for many years to come.
Thank you, Commissioner. And I just want to remind us that we have room for maybe 1 or 2 written questions. So our next written question comes from Leonor Vanek, and she says, Commissioner Cox, thank you for the presentation and your insights. Can you please further discuss your vision with updating of the plan for Chicago that you have highlighted, and how this impacts Pilsen and Little Village and other Latinx individuals? Number 2, how community participation will be undertaken while under COVID-19 restrictions, and 3, timeliness. Thank you in advance for your assistance with this matter.
First Deputy Commissioner Gorski, would you like to take on the question? I think that's a question for We Will Chicago.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner. Thank you for your comment. I assume that you saw some of the editorials that Commissioner Cox put in local publications about the We Will plan. We're just kicking that off this fall and coming up with a plan for community engagement. And right now it does have a 3-pronged approach. One is, of course, to use social media and that type of outreach to reach the greatest amount of Chicagoans. There will be translation available for different communities, as well as those in the disabled community. There will also be focus groups put together for the various parts of the plan, such as economic development and housing, etc. And then a third component is also to send out surveys through a platform called Bang the Table. And we have hired a consulting firm to help the city facilitate this, that their specialty is this engagement. And part of that firm also includes local artists that will go out into the various communities in Chicago to help with this. So again, we just started kicking it off this fall. So I expect that you'll begin to see some of this activity in your neighborhood shortly. And then I think the second part of the question was, how does Pilsen and the Latinx communities, how do they fold into this effort? Again, we're hoping to reach all Chicagoans. So this community, as well as other communities across the city, will have the opportunity to comment on the various parts of the plan and to have your voices heard in terms of what's important to you as we build the city for the future.
Thank you, Deputy Commissioner. And because I'd like to honor our last request for speaker, I invite Judith Vasquez to please share her comment or her question. Ms. Vasquez? Ms. Vasquez, are you ready to speak?
Okay, yes, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you very much for your time, and Commissioner, thank you very much for all the comments that you've made and your commitment to file for landmarking of St. Adalbert's. I also would like to ask you to consider in your report landmarking the convent and also the rectory. I also support Julie Sawicki's recommendation, SOSA's recommendation, and also I also like to appreciate and thank the fellow who just spoke in support of St. Adalbert's. If we talk about Pilsen being a neighborhood for the people, one of the things that it is we're talking about St. Adalbert's and the historical building and the immigrants that came from Poland to build the building. It's really important if we're looking for the future, into the future of religion and refilling the church. One of the proposed things is to have St. Adalbert's be one of the landmarks of the community and communities surrounding it. It's a big enough structure to hold ample numbers of people as a place of worship. I think it's really essential for us to keep it in the Latinos in the neighborhood, and also landmarking 18th Street and the proposed neighborhood of Pilsen being landmarked. And I also was the one that was living on, I do live on 1700 block of 17th Street. I went to St. Adalbert's. I graduated from there. It is essential that we also, that you would recommend, like I said before, landmarking the convent and the church. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Vasquez.
Thank you.
Commissioner, would you like to respond, or shall we move on?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I completely understand the passion that St. Adalbert's has created, and people's commitment to how it was built, who worshiped there, and their desire to have it stay a religious structure. It just does appear to me that this is advocacy that has to be centered at the Archdiocese. All I can do is assure that the building stays in place, but the Archdiocese has deconsecrated the structure, and so if it's going to become a church again, that is a discussion that has to be. They have to be integrally involved in. I feel that, I feel people are asking planning to do something that planning can't do. And if there's anything we can do to facilitate a conversation between those advocates and the Archdiocese, I'm happy to do that. But all we can do is make sure that the building is preserved, and the legacy of the people who built it and worship there is preserved. And we've committed to begin that process this evening.
Thank you, Commissioner. I would now like to, at this time, invite Alderman Siccho to address us. And Alderman, you have 5 minutes.
Yeah, and again, I'm not gonna be timed, and I'm already hard enough to be treated like some sort of community member. And I remind the commissioner that we have public officials here, and the public official is elected for a reason, to listen to the residents, to listen to the constituents who elected me, to make sure that we have a plan, that we are not only committed, but we have every single intention to make this a reality. I hear Commissioner Cox have talked about, in his own community, has been fighting with the community. I hope, Commissioner Cox, now that as commissioner, now you are not fighting against our community, because exactly what's happening here. You start listening to my constituents, our administration, and the multiple other officials who are working together to address the difficult issues that we are dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
Pilsen has a uniqueness, Commissioner. Pilsen has welcomed immigrants for a long time. A lot of immigrants for different sorts has been the entry point. Have fight long and hard to preserve whatever you see here. Have long-lasting effects of gentrification with the complicity of your department, the Department of Planning, and the previous administration, a disgraced administration full of corruption. As a result, and you've seen the numbers, as I shared with you, our community had lost the displacement of 14,000 residents, 14,000 residents over the last 2 decades, with the silence and complicity of the Department of Planning. Our taxes having increased just a little bit under the downtown area, 478%. That's the increase in the last 2 decades of the property taxes of a community like Pilsen. Now, when we're talking about not options and there's nothing else we can do, right? I think that's what we have commissioners, that's what we have a Department of Planning, or maybe we should start questioning the use, the use of a Department of Planning. We've seen what happened in the 606. A demolition freeze was put into place, a demolition freeze that I'm proposing, and I intend to have it at the next zoning committee, because that's what our community deserves, the same treatment as any other community. These fear tactics of, well, I don't know what else to do. Well, that's Commissioner Cox. That's what the city of Chicago and the taxpayers pay you to do. Otherwise, we may maybe have to find another person who can figure out how to have demolition reform. What we need to have here is also help to our property taxes, to our property taxpayers, to people in the city of Chicago who are suffering from a pandemic. We are having a conversation with a Cook County commissioner to make sure that we bring relief to the long-term residents, to the people who pay taxes, to the seniors who are losing their homes. And what we're proposing is a disgrace. The Department of Planning proposing a landmark in the middle of a pandemic after 18 months of conversation and refusing to hear what we have heard multiple times, which is demolition reform and a demolition freeze that we intend to pass. We need to bring more affordable housing to the community. We can and we will address the issue of demolitions, because you know very well, Commissioner Cox, we have been having conversations about this. Demolitions are happening all over Pilsen, across the Pilsen district, the historic district. We are already at a historic district that offers some of the similar incentives. What's happening here and what's happening around the city, and you can look at the budget, at the morality of this budget. When we talk about developers who are taking the TIF money at the same time that our families are losing their homes, who benefits? Of course, it's the developers, Commissioner Cox. Those developers who want to pay their bills, who are taking billions of dollars in TIF money, and an administration that is serving them, not the people of Chicago. Now, the distasteful maneuvering of extending this against the will of the people of Chicago, of Pilsen, and my administration will not be tolerated again. There is no precedent across the city of imposing a landmark with less than 50 plus 1% of approval. We have 95% of the homeowners who have said no. And you will listen to the committee, Commissioner Cox. You will listen to what the community is asking, and we will deliver, because there are things that we can do. There are plans that we have in place, and we will make sure that you join these efforts to make sure that we have a demolition freeze for 6 months, and we can extend it if we need to, like we done it in the 606. Alderman Tony, I encourage you and I urge you to work with your colleagues, to work with your colleague in the 25th Ward to put this ordinance that is already in committee since the September 9th. We can address the issue of demolitions across the Pilsen Historic District, including St. Adalbert, which is the landmark. And the reason why this is not protected is because, of course, developers are eyeing the property. And we were the only ones who were speaking about it and trying to block any kind of development to take away from the parishioners. And we'll make sure that that is preserved. And we will make sure that we discuss a plan to make sure that we have preservation of people, not only buildings. Now, what we need to do, Commissioner Cox, is to talk to the assessor's office, to talk to the commissioner, as we're doing with the housing department, to make sure that we have a plan to address the high property taxes and a failed administration that is trying to impose the same of the past, another property tax increase, and failing to use TIF money for what it's supposed to do, to help the people of Chicago. TIF money is money from the community. that paid by the small businesses, but paid by the homeowners. But yet we have developers using that, mega developers and corporations using our TIF money. Those are the benefactors. We should be using that to help for the infrastructure needs. That's what it's supposed to do. And we're failing. That's how the developers are benefiting, especially in a time like this. In a time like this, when our communities are hurting, that's when we need the city to act. When have the Commissioner Gorski, when have you been when our commission was displaced? Don't be disingenuous now, telling us that you're going to help us now, after 14,000 people are gone. Now we need you to take action, and you're going to listen to my administration. You like it or not. And if you don't like it, then we will see you in 3 years. And I already told the mayor that. We'll see, and then you elect someone else. Because the community has spoken and spoke clearly that we want real preservation. The Archdiocese doesn't deserve a special treatment either. The Archdiocese needs to make sure that those buildings belong to the community, to the parishioners. And we've been very clear with that. So let's just stop with the facades. Let's just stop with the maneuvering and the inside deals. I'm sick and tired of that. We have very clear what we need to do in December 1st meeting. We need to make sure that we have that demolition freeze that is clear by legal, and it's the same thing that 606 have done. We're not going to be too little too late. We want a conversation with the assessor's office, and we already have a plan with the Cook County Commissioner. Commissioner Cox, you need to be at the table. You need to be at the table with us. Solve these problems. And when we need to make sure that we have TIF money and other incentives for our communities, we will make sure that that happens. But to continue allowing developers to take over across the Pilsen historic district is not acceptable. And I'm not going to tolerate that anymore. I'm sorry to my constituents that you have had to go to protest and resort to, to anything that you can be doing when we have a clear way of doing this democratically on committee with legislation. Commissioner Cox, you are a commissioner. You are not an elected official. Commissioner Gorski, you're not an elected official. I'm having going to another boards. I am not done yet. I am not done yet.
Yes,
so
thank
what I urge you is to make sure that we have those two measures, Alderman Tony, on the next December 1st committee. So we address demolitions. There are things that we can do. We just don't have the political willingness. But here in the 25th ward, we do have the willingness to have justice and equity for homeowners, for most vulnerable. So those are the two items that need to be in that agenda. And I don't want to have to be resorting to other measures, because if I have to join my constituents and protest, I will. And if I have to take legal action to protect the right of self-determination, I will. Thank you again. And this is the last time our community is treated like that. It is outrageous after I saw the numbers of everything we're seeing. 500% property tax assessment. That's what corruption does to our community. And if Mayor Lightfoot is committed to change, is really committed to change, then we're going to work together. And if it's not, then we're going to make sure that we have legal action and any kind of thing that we need. Because here in our community, we're suffering, and our homeowners have suffered long enough. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman. Thank you, Alderman. You're muted, Commissioner.
So thank you, Norma, and thank you, Alderman Cicho Lopez. I think I've been very, very clear that I can make a commitment to you to work together and to work with Pilsen community groups on legislative actions that can prevent displacement, that can prevent demolition, and the deconversion, and in other areas where I think the planning can add value. I'm happy to join you in advocating with the assessor's office for a comprehensive way to address the tax burden that areas that are adjacent to downtown primarily are feeling. But that is, I think you know that is a citywide issue. It's an issue that the assessor's office has to lead, and I can be an advocate along with you to see that it is brought to their attention. I'm committed to that. So just thank you, Alderman, for your advocacy on behalf of residents. I said early on, if I've learned anything over the course of this process, is that there's a very, very strong belief in self-determination in Pilsen. There's a very strong desire to preserve the people first. And that is why I believe that it's far more strategic to lead with the preservation of people and the housing. And so I think you will see that the desire for an affordable housing strategy, that desire has been heard. But the first act is a vote. And as I mentioned before, the zoning committee intends to take this matter up at a special meeting on December 1st. And the Landmark Commission, whose recommendation it was to create this landmark district, the planning department still fully supports it, because I know the power of that tool to do many of the things that we all are seeking to do for Pilsen. So I know that the district can preserve the character, can preserve the culture and affordable housing and the people of Pilsen. But in the end, that is a decision that's up to City Council. And unfortunately, there will be no second chance to revive this district if it doesn't move forward by ordinance by the City Council. And at that point, we should reconvene and work on those things that I know the planning department can commit to, and that where we can add value. So I just want to thank everyone for listening, to giving us your feedback and your comments, and for fully engaging us in this issue. It's been incredibly informative for us, and I hope you too have learned something about these issues that we brought forward. So I just want to thank again Norma for your steadfast guidance and facilitation of this conversation. And I just want to thank everyone who's participated in this robust conversation on the future of Pilsen. Thank you.
Thank you to everyone. We want to remind you any questions that were left unanswered will be answered by DPD staff, and they will compile an FAQ that will be available to all. Thank you everyone for your commitment to be here. And I personally wish you health in all sense of the word. Thank you very much. Have a good night. Buenas noches a todos.
Thank you.